Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your source material, your research, your notes, your articles, and we distill them into the sharpest, most actionable knowledge nuggets. You leave here informed, fast. Today, we're doing a really critical deep dive into the inner workings of workplace psychology. We're using the textbook, Psychology in the Work Context, the Industrial Human Experience as our guide. Our mission today is not just to summarize, it's to give you that essential framework, both theoretical and practical, for really understanding human behavior at work. We're going to chart a course from the individual all the way up to the entire organizational culture. We really want to get to the core of why people thrive or, why they fail at work. Okay, let's unpack this, and I think we have to start at the very beginning. We need to define the field. Industrial and Organizational Psychology, or IO psychology. What exactly is it according to our source material?
Well, the source makes it really clear that IO psychology is it's applied science.
Applied science.
Yeah, it's not just some academic theory you read about. It's the systematic application of psychological principles, of data, to work environments.
And the goal is to solve business problems.
Specifically, to solve business problems. Think of it as the ultimate bridge discipline.
The ultimate bridge discipline. I like that. So what kind of problems are we talking about here? Productivity, conflict.
Precisely. The goal is really twofold. On one hand, you want to enhance productivity. On the other, you want to improve employee satisfaction, their well-being. And this is actually where the core tension of the textbook comes in, which is a key insight for you.
Attention.
Attention, yes. IO psychology has to constantly balance the pure discipline of psychological science.
So the scientific method, ethical research, that sort of thing.
Exactly. With the incredibly demanding, very practical needs of human resources. HR needs quick, measurable, and often standardized solutions.
So it's about being scientifically sound while also making sure people get hired effectively.
That's it. It's a real balancing act.
That distinction feels crucial. It keeps IO from becoming purely academic. It has to have real-world stakes. So once we have that foundation, we can move to the micro level, right?
Yeah.
To understand the company, you first have to understand the individual. And this is where, for me, it gets really interesting. The text suggests a huge amount of an employee's performance is actually beyond their conscious control.
Exactly. The source spends a lot of time on individual behavioral processes. And it starts with something that's, frankly, often overlooked in standard HR training,
Which is
the biological basis of work performance.
the biological basis.
It's a real aha moment when you get it.
Yeah.
It's not just saying, oh, physical health matters. It's linking specific biological and neurological functions directly to work capability.
Wait, hold on. That sounds like a massive implication. If we're talking biological basis,
Yep.
are we talking about cortisol levels, brain chemistry, sleep cycles, all being directly relevant to an annual performance review?
Absolutely. The textbook frames it as the foundational constraint.
The constraint.
Yes. For example, think about sustained attention or decision-making. Both are critical workplace skills, right?
Sure.
Well, they're fundamentally rooted in the prefrontal cortex. So if an employee is dealing with chronic stress, or high cortisol, or sleep deprivation, those neurological systems literally cannot function at their peak.
Regardless of their skills or training.
It doesn't matter. HR practices that ignore these biological realities are just failing to address the true root cause of low performance.
So all the training in the world is useless if the employee is just biologically exhausted. That definitely makes the conversation around burnout a lot less abstract.
It does. And beating on that, the text then moves to learning and perception. Learning is, skill acquisition. We all get that. But perception. Perception is often the silent killer of harmony in an organization.
The silent killer.
Yeah, because perception is how employees interpret their work environment. And that is highly, highly individual. So a manager gives some critical feedback. One employee might perceive that as a threat to their competence, and they get defensive. But another employee might perceive that exact same feedback as a clear path for growth.
And the text gets into the biases there, the mental shortcuts.
Oh, absolutely.
That.
It emphasizes cognitive shortcuts and biases. The way our brain just quickly categorizes information to make sense of the world. Those shortcuts govern our reactions, our biases, our behavior, and they often lead to conflict, even when the facts are identical for everyone.
It sounds like perception is the real gatekeeper to motivation then. If you perceive your environment as supportive, you're driven. If you perceive it as hostile, you withdraw.
Precisely. And that leads directly into the next piece, motivation and emotion. The source summarizes a lot of the core drive theories, but the most important takeaway is the function of emotional intelligence. EQ.
Right, EQ, which
Okay?
can feel like such a vague, soft skill.
But it's not treated that way here. It's treated as a measurable, vital component for success. It dictates how well an individual manages their own biological and perceptual systems and how effectively they can interact with others, especially under pressure.
So it's the engine, but it's also the governor.
It's the engine and the governor of workplace conduct, yes.
Okay, so we've mapped out the individual from their physical limits all the way to their emotional drives. The real challenge, though, is what happens when that solo employee steps into a team. That's where you have to connect the dots. You shift from the individual to the collective experience.
And that's the moment individual psychology smacks right into social dynamics. The source provides a really comprehensive summary of how groups form, how power structures emerge, and critically, the different ways groups manage conflict and make decisions.
Conflict management is so key. I mean, I've seen teams with brilliant people completely fail just because they couldn't argue constructively.
The source illustrates that difference beautifully. It suggests that high-performing groups aren't the ones without conflict. They're the ones whose employees share core attitudes and values that allow for task conflict.
Task conflict. So arguing about the work itself, the method.
Yes, arguing about the method, not relationship conflict, which is arguing about the person. And this is where that alignment between personal values and corporate culture becomes so crucial.
Because if they clash,
If they clash, that friction is going to show up as low morale, high turnover, and just constant relationship conflict.
and often the source of that friction is leadership. Let's talk about the textbook's focus on management style. I'm guessing they run through the classics, transformational, transactional.
They do, yes, but the little nugget of insight here is what they call contextual efficacy.
Contextual efficacy, meaning what works in context.
Exactly. The text points out that transformational leadership, the style that's all about inspiring and intellectually stimulating people, is highly effective in places that need innovation and adaptive thinking.
Why there specifically?
Because it links the daily work to an employee's higher values. It gives it meaning. But, and this is the interesting part, transactional leadership, which is based on strict rewards and punishments.
The carrot and the stick.
The carrot and the stick, yeah. It's actually more effective in highly standardized, routine, or safety-critical environments.
Yeah.
The error is applying a one-size-fits-all leadership style. The best leader is the one who can match their style to the demands of the task.
That makes leadership almost like a diagnostic tool. You have to analyze the environment before you can even choose the right approach. Now, tying the individual back into the team, let's talk about the deep dive the text takes into personality. Because everyone, at some point, has had to take a personality test for work.
This is one of the most technically rewarding sections of the book. It goes over the major theories, trait theory, cognitive, humanistic, but the practical nugget that unifies them is this concept they call work adjustment.
Work adjustment.
Work adjustment. So if we just look at trait theory for a second, the foundation of modern I/O is the five-factor model, the FFM. That's the technical tool. Work adjustment takes that model and says, a person's specific measurable personality traits must align with the specific demands of their job for them to thrive, for them to successfully adjust.
Can you give us a quick thought experiment on that? What does poor work adjustment actually look like in practice? Not just a bad fit, but what happens?
Sure. Imagine two traits, high conscientiousness and high agreeableness.
Okay.
A job in forensic accounting demands high conscientiousness. You need that attention to detail, that organized workflow. That's a great fit.
Makes sense.
But what if that same job also requires aggressive, confrontational debt collection? Suddenly, that person's high agreeableness trait is fighting against the task demand.
So their own personality is at war with their job description.
Exactly. The employee's spending all this cognitive energy just trying to overcome their innate desire to cooperate. That leads to chronic stress, low adjustment, and eventually burnout, even if they have all the technical accounting skills in the world.
Wow. So it's not just about what you can do, it's about what the job forces you to be. And if that forces you into an uncomfortable personality space, the job itself is setting you up to fail. That is a very sophisticated way to look at hiring.
It moves hiring from just a competency checklist to an exercise in psychological foresight. The goal is to predict that adjustment before it becomes a problem.
Now, moving beyond just performance, the textbook takes a turn that I find unique and really commendable. It dedicates a significant focus to psychological well-being. This pushes IO psychology past simple productivity metrics and into holistic organizational health. It feels very modern, very necessary.
It is a critical modern focus, especially now. The text gives specific systemic strategies for managing stress and preventing burnout.
And this isn't just about, telling employees to be more resilient, right?
Not at all. It's about recognizing that chronic stress and burnout are often organizational failures, not individual weaknesses. It calls for organizational interventions, like redesigning reporting structures or actively managing workload. And this section, it doesn't shy away from the serious clinical realities. They detail actual work-related disorders.
So things like depression and anxiety.
Yes, and they cover how to identify conditions like depression or anxiety that might not just show up at work, but can be demonstrably caused or at least exacerbated by the work environment itself.
Which places a clear, unavoidable responsibility on the employer.
Responsibility to maintain a psychologically healthy environment.
Yes. And this leads us directly into what might be the truly unique strength of this source material. Its intense focus on the South African context. This isn't some generalized global text. It provides specific, localized knowledge. Why is that regional focus so important for this framework?
Because context dictates application. It just does. The source emphasizes that in a highly multicultural and diverse population like South Africa's, you cannot just import I/O tools that were developed in, say, North America or Europe and expect them to work.
You can't just copy and paste.
You can't. The text really underscores the need to manage diversity and to understand what they call culture-bound psychological issues. For instance, the very constructs that define things like motivation or loyalty or even just professional communication styles can vary drastically across cultures. So if you use an assessment tool that isn't standardized for that specific population,
You could get deeply inaccurate results.
deeply inaccurate and, frankly, unfair hiring or promotion decisions. The stakes are incredibly high for practitioners in that region.
Absolutely.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this context directly impacts ethics and law. The text spends a lot of time on how South African labor laws apply to psychological practices, especially around assessment and testing. Crucially, they focus on the ethical codes from bodies like the HPCSA, that's the Health Professions Council of South Africa,
The official regulating body.
the official regulating body for all psychological practice in the country. And their guidelines govern everything: how tests are administered, how you maintain confidentiality, the overall ethical treatment of employees. It ensures that I/O practices are legally compliant and morally sound within that specific jurisdiction.
So the IO psychologist becomes, what, a scientist, a manager, and a legal gatekeeper all at once.
That's a great way to put it.
And that grounding in law and ethics provides the ultimate check on the whole field. It forces responsibility. So what does this all mean? We've completed our deep dive into the industrial human experience. We started by defining IO psychology, that constant tension it faces. We moved from the neurological foundations of the individual employee. We charted how perception and emotion drive action. Then we looked at the complex alignment required in teams through leadership and that critical concept of personality job fit or work adjustment. And finally, we examined the organization's responsibility for well-being and the essential legal and multicultural grounding that's required for ethical practice, specifically in the South African context.
And the takeaway for you, the learner, is the practical value of this framework. This isn't just academic reading, it's a blueprint. It gives you the actual mechanisms to understand why a team is underperforming, even with high talent, and how healthy organizations are built from the psychological ground up. It's the kind of knowledge that lets you shift from just reacting to workplace events to actually predicting and engineering better outcomes.
And here is a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you move forward with this. Given the text's explicit and foundational connection between biological processes, things like sleep, stress hormones, neurological function, and measurable work performance, how much of our standard job fit assessments, which currently focus so heavily on skills and personality, should actually shift their primary focus? Should we be diagnosing and optimizing for physical and neurological support first? I mean, if the brain is the engine, should IO psychology become less about the steering wheel and more about the quality of the fuel? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.